Good evening. Welcome to the Lighthouse Torah Project. I'm Avraham Shira. I hope you've had a good week so far. We're rolling down to another Shabbos, thank God. It's 1 a.m. in Israel and all is quiet, pretty much, out here on the mountains. And I hope it's quiet and peaceful wherever you are. Tonight I've chosen a title, koteret, I guess you call it in Hebrew, a headline called Divine Paradigms. Now, there are many, many divine paradigms. Why do we call it that? Because it's a model that we can use over and over to understand more about creation and understand the repetitions and the structures that God uses to make reality are happening over and over on the grandest scale and the most, microscopic scale. Perhaps some of you, I remember a long time ago, they showed us a movie in 8th grade physics. Probably wasn't called physics then. But, it was a movie of, I'm sure they remade it actually since I was in 8th grade, a couple thousand years ago. And it was a picture of a boy on a boat with a mosquito on his hand, and the camera backed away into the farthest reaches of the universe. And the camera came all the way forward and went into the mosquito and into the blood that he was drinking, borrowing from the boy, I guess you could say, and then deep, 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 deep into the molecular structure and the atomic structure. And the point of the whole thing was amazing was that when you got to the outer reaches of space, the visual image that you received was about the same as the graphic or visual image that you received of the microscopic world. That the macro and the micro really reflected each other. Great amounts of space between atoms and between the structures that make up atoms, and of course, in great amounts of space in the solar system and in the galaxies, etc. So this is a paradigm, and there are many, many of these. And the more you learn them, they're like tools. They're like, sunglasses on reality that you can use anytime to understand concepts in Torah. And of course, we're not talking about just Torah as, the book. We're talking about the whole metaphysical realm and the wisdom that has been passed down through literally hundreds of thousands of books and teachings from thousands and thousands of sages over many, many, many years. Okay, so tonight we're going to start with one paradigm, which I believe in the title I called the pyramid from the infinite to the finite. And our pyramid is just a shape, of course. It's really two-dimensional on paper, but a pyramid obviously is not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. It's actually four triangles that join together at a point, right? And so the pyramid, there's been a lot of research done on pyramids. We're not going to go there tonight. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot of things about pyramids, but that's not our purpose. What our purpose is to understand that why this is a useful structure for us and how it helps us. So we place the idea of the infinite being at the top of the pyramid, and then we place the absolute lowest, farthest being or reality at the bottom of the pyramid, which is the most finite. So as I was putting this class together, I was asking myself, well, how do we measure infinite and finite? And we need some handles here. We need some tools, some measuring devices. So I put together a few of these that are also going to help us. And I highly recommend you write things down. I don't have at the moment I haven't had this written up in a properly usable form to give out to you in information in a DOF or whatnot. I'm using my own longhand notes, and maybe someday I'll actually have that graphic capacity. But by the time I learn the tools, there'll probably be new tools, and better if I just keep on going with my paper and my pencil. Okay, but how do we know? How do we measure what's finite, what's infinite? Because you can measure infinite, of course, the first thing you think of is time or space. That which is clearly above time and space, and that which is bound to time and space. Okay, that's one idea. That which has no connection at all to time and space. The time and space is actually a very limited realm. Even if the universe is estimated to be 150 billion light years of the known universe. That's a long, long space, right? That's a big theater. But for God, that's nothing. It's just physical realm. So that's one idea, to measure from above time and space. And time, of course, keep going back to the beginning. Imagine 6,000 years of human history. It's a long journey, but that's nothing in the universal idea of time. But these ideas that you're very familiar with, I'm sure you've seen some, learned a lot in school, and you catch all kinds of amazing videos nowadays on science. But where the Torah comes in and helps us more is like this. When we're trying to create a spiritual hierarchy from the infinite to the finite, how do we measure? Well, God is the ultimate example of free choice, right? The ultimate example of free choice, because God can do anything, anytime, anywhere he wants. He's not bound by his size, his age, his bank account, his gender, his wisdom, his foreknowledge. He's not bound by anything. So he has the ultimate example of free choice. And then no free choice. If we want to we're going to stay in the physical realm about this. Okay, you come down, a human being has certain free choice. And then you go down lower and you have the animal world, and you would say, well, animals don't really have free choice. They're driven by instinct. But I don't know. I've seen so many amazing videos in our generation about animals helping humans and animals helping other animals. And I'm thinking, these creatures are either, momentarily God can send an angel onto an animal to make it an ape save a baby, like that famous video that most of you, I hope, have seen. But that's only one case. God can invest an animal with intelligence, like he did with Bilam's donkey, for whatever mission that he needs to have accomplished. Okay, so at that point in time, there was a certain amount of more free choice attached to an animal. But the lowest level of free choice in the physical realm, you'd say, well, does a tree have free choice to grow or not grow? It's influenced by its environment. Does a rock have free choice to move or not move? Probably not, you would think. So those are levels that are much lower on the scale between infinite and finite. Another way to measure between this ultimate concept of Hashem and the world that he created is complete, absolute, total goodness and absolute, total evil. That we can, and these are all continuums. So, and it's important to have this continuum in mind because it helps expand our ability to deal with life. We're not just learning stuff here that it's interesting or kind of, an exercise, a mental exercise, but rather when we understand that we exist on these continuums and we're all moving along them all the time, depending on what we do, or what we don't do, what we think or don't think or feel, etc. So the ultimate good to ultimate evil is another way that we can frame our reality. Now, another thing, a way that connects a little bit to free choice is the idea of being alive or being what people call dead. But in Kabbalah, there's no such thing as inanimate. A rock is animate. It just has a very low soul, if you will, low not being a put down, of course, meaning undeveloped soul. The rock doesn't have free choice to go to school or go to the playground, right? The rock was created in the beginning, and it's probably been morphed a few times from being part of a mountain to part of a riverbed to being crushed up and sent into the sea, and then and then floating to the bottom of the sea and becoming some lobster's living room floor. But the idea, though, is what the Kabbalah teaches us. Since everything has a soul, we just don't look at soul with the right expansive lens. In other words, soul is not just you and I because we're sitting here and talking. Soul is the life force or the energy that creates the thing. So that's why the Gemara says that every blade of grass has an angel. That's the life force that is telling it to get up and grow in the morning and reach for the sun and reach down in the earth for minerals and water. And so what we see is that everything is animate. It just has different levels of animation. And the proof is, like, psychics can see souls and other beings in, people with Ruach HaKodesh can see souls attached to walls and attached to trees and all kinds of things are been impressed on physical, what we call physical or inanimate objects. But if you see that as we're talking now, my soul is doing most of the talking, right? So I'm sending out information and ideas and hopefully a little heart behind it, right? And your soul is receiving what you receive. Okay, so we're impacting each other. But the ability to have impact on each other is also a soul function. So if you look at a wall at the Kotel with the right eyes, you'll see millions of prayers. You'll see a tremendous amount of spiritual energy emanating from those rocks. Now, those rocks did not start out that way. They've been impacted by a long, long time. That means they have the soul to receive and hold on to and to store. So you see the thing, one of the other measures is the idea of memory. The ability to store information is a soul function. Now, Rabbi Nachman calls memory itself a miracle because the nature of reality is to forget. People forget, as Lo Elena, we see happens as people get older, and also the physical world degrades as it gets older. Things change as they get older, and they lose their original shape and form, etc. Memory itself is above that. What's the proof? That if you remember the first time your grandmother gave you a hug, and it feels so good today, 40, 30, however many years later, that's a memory of an event, but it's still alive and has impact on you today. That means there's soul there. So you see, soul has the ability to rise above time. And that should strengthen our belief in our connection to God, because he's above time. He gave us something that's above time, something very precious, and that's our soul. So that you can think about your grandmother or whoever you loved or whoever you missed or whoever is absent that you'd like to have close, and you can be with them at the level of memory. But it's a deeper recording than you think. Okay. Now, I'll be giving a class on Web Yeshiva before Rosh Hashanah on this idea at great depth called Ya'aleh V'Yavo, because Ya'aleh V'Yavo is an amazing prayer that teaches us about a journey to the Beit HaMikdash and a journey within and a journey in memory. So we'll go there at another time. Further on. So we have all these continuums, animate to inanimate. Animate being the ability to respond and impact. What else do we have? Well, the greatest measure of soul, or if you will, this spiritual, on our spiritual hierarchy, is the desire to be close to God, the desire to be part of God, the feeling of closeness, the longing. The ultimate absolute opposite of that, of course, is revulsion from God. God forbid. You know, the people that hate God, they hate the concept, they hate, you know, their first grade Bible class. You know, whatever reason they hate doesn't matter. We're not going there. That's for the therapy room. But the truth is that there are people that are completely bound up with the love of God and people that really hate the concept. They don't even think it's real, and if they do think it's a real being, they'll still hate him. And that's a pretty hard thing to imagine. If you hate something so much that everybody else believes is good at various levels of belief, of course, you are investing a large amount of energy in your non-belief, like an atheist. Tremendous amount of energy goes into not believing and to proving that to yourself. But we're not doing a class on that either. We're doing a class on how to measure and how to experience. And we're going to do a meditation tonight, God willing. It's going to help us with this. Okay, so if you want to ask, do I have a big soul? Do I have a small soul? Well, you're here on Thursday night learning Torah, a special Torah from the Kabbalah. That already means that you've got something that a lot of other people aren't interested in. And there are people, everybody at their level. But that's one of the ways we measure. And now you could go further. What about this guy that he just wants to go run around and drink beer and race cars and do crazy things? That doesn't mean he has a small soul. That just means he hasn't been focused yet, because desire itself is a quantity of power. Desire, your desire for things is given to you based on who you are and what you deem to do in the world. You know, whenever I go somewhere and I see like a security guard and he's just sitting there like looking at his phone, or maybe he's looking at the people passing through the metal detector. Who knows? But I was once a security guard when I was like, I don't know, in college for one half shift. And I called the manager. I said, I can't do this. I can't stand around and watch people to see if they're going to steal. I'm sorry. I quit, Yeah. But the point is that even like the famous story of Reish Lakish, who was the head, the Talmud calls him the head of the thieves, right? And Rabbi Yochanan, who is like the greatest rabbi of his generation. Rabbi Yochanan was considered very beautiful, and he was out in the river swimming. And this Reish Lakish was like with the thieves, and they probably had a rough night, and they were taking a swim, and the story goes that Reish Lakish swam over to Rabbi Yochanan thinking he was a beautiful woman because he didn't have a beard for whatever reason. And when he got close, he saw it wasn't a woman swimming in the river. It was this big, and he was known to be a heavy guy, a big guy there in the water. And Rabbi Yochanan was extremely smart and also imbued with spiritual power. He understood who he was and what he was doing there. And he said, I saw the way you swam over here thinking I was a woman. But if you sit and use your power to learn Torah, I will give you my sister as a wife. No, not tomorrow and not the next day, but if you prove yourself, then I'll give you a great prize, because that's the way they used to do it. Family matters, right? It's a little bit different than today, but nonetheless. So Reish Lakish took him on his word. He sat down and he started to learn, and he became one of the great rabbis of his generation as well. And he did marry Rabbi Yochanan's sister. And so we see that it's the quantity of power of desire that is a soul measure. So as we're going to go up and down our pyramid now, remember what we just did was just get, the hiking equipment, the climber's gear. That's what we were just acquiring. Okay, but now we're going to start our mountain. But remember that story, and don't ever judge yourself as being a small soul. You don't know who you are until you try, till you get in there. Now, this pyramid, we begin again at the peak the concept of infinite. The concept of infinite means there's no handles, Ein Sof. There is no definition of God except for that there's no definition. And people love, I can define God. Everybody likes that challenge. I could fix this Rubik's Cube. No, you can't. And if you try, you can go insane. Because once you enter the question, it leads to endless questions that you will not be able to answer. And that can leave you in a very bad psychic and mental and emotional state. Anyways, and I know people that have tried and they don't end up well. Usually they end up being not religious, which is a whole, that's probably a PhD. Okay. So we started this idea of no definitions, no parameters, no boundaries, infinity. That means nothing. Not up, not down, not right, left. Those are all already parameters and boundaries. And so when we start there, what we're starting with is really nothing. But that nothing, of course, is the ultimate something. Before I got to Torah, I said, there's got to be something. I call it the great something. I don't know what it is. I don't believe too many people. I don't trust too many people. I was just driving around the states in my van writing poetry and trying to find out the truth. Okay. Now, but as we come down, what's the next level? Now, I'm simplifying this for our purposes, for who we are in our class together learning. And if you open up the Eitz Chaim of the Arizal, you'll get about 700-800 pages of information about all the layers of just the spiritual world, barely even entering at all the physical. But I'm going to do a kind of a shortened version. And many of you've learned inside other Sfarim, and so you know about other levels and concepts, but I'm just trying to break it down all the way to the lowest of the physical realm, and you'll see why when we get there. Okay, so at the top of the pyramid, after the infinite created himself in a relatable fashion. He created his own characteristics, his own traits, the attributes that will become the divine persona. It's a beautiful idea if you think about it, that you can create yourself. And we do that. Some people take it more seriously, some don't pay attention. But you know what? You can become anything you want if you really put your heart and mind to it. And that's very important, like when you're trying to become a better person, a better husband, a better wife, a better mother or father. It's very important because we got to leave the past behind and become something new. Now, so God's traits, that's the tree of life. 10 sfirot, 10 basic traits. They have their Hebrew names. I'm not going to go through them now. You can get them in any Kabbalah book and study and learn about them. You can get it in 1,000 different shiurim online. But first, he created his traits. And then these started to multiply until the traits became collections that were persona. And the 5 main personas, what we call partsufim in Hebrew. A partsuf means face, but it's more than just your face. It's a whole persona of being. And of course, there's the Abba, the Ima, the son, and the daughter, the ultimate cosmic two-child perfect family, right? And then the fifth quality over all of them is called Keter, or the crown. Now, each of these is made of 10 traits that we learned about earlier. So you'll notice that as we go down the pyramid, things get more and more complex and less simple, which is fine. That's exactly the way God wanted to do it. Because that's why it's so important to strive for simplicity, because as it's a miracle, but as we strive for simplicity, we get closer to the ultimately simple, living, infinite being, which is, well, that's why we're here. Okay, so he created the traits, and then he created personas with those traits, called the Partsufim. Now, coming down from there, what's the ultimate collection of those traits? The ultimate collection of those qualities is man, the human being. Because we are the collective totality of all the pieces that he created first. He rebuilt them into what's called Za, or Zer Anpin, which of course is still up in the realm of the Partsufim, but when that became materialized and physicalized, if you will, it became a human being. Now, you notice we haven't talked anything about angels yet, not the higher angels, not the lower ones, not the bad ones, not the good ones. We're only talking about going from the godly level to the human level. But, you know, most of us would probably be humble, I hope humble enough to say that most angels know more than us. And you know what? They do, but not at our root. So what we've been talking about, the greatest collection of God's powers is man, is the perfect spiritual being called man, not the physical guys and gals that we are running around down here. At the root of our soul, we are perfect. And therefore, up at that level, we are actually higher than angels. And that's why Rabbi Nachman says in the first Torah and Likutei Moharan, you can look it up. We've already learned it on my Patreon site. He says that a Jewish person is created to rule over angels. When I first read that a few decades ago, I was like, wow, I've arrived. Someone's finally trying to give me some power. Most of the world's trying to take your power. And here the rabbi is telling us that we're created to rule angels. Now, the difference between the statement and the reality is about, I don't know, 50 million levels of Kedusha. But it's okay. Just got to be on the highway, remember. So that idea is based on the idea that our upper soul is higher than the angels. And that means we can know what God wants to do and say before they know. That's the people like Moshe Rabbeinu, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The angels would go to them to learn Torah because they were getting Torah straight from God. Obviously, that's what Moshe did. And we are taught that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the penimius aspect of Moshe Rabbeinu's soul. That's why he brought down the penimius of the Torah, the Zohar. Because we are all composite souls. And if you have a soul like Moshe Rabbeinu, then your composites are pretty big pieces too, okay, in the puzzle. Now, so we've gone from the human level. Now, after that highest human level comes the archangels, the highest angels. Now, these angels they never die. They stand and they do God's will, and they have the ability to enter the physical realm and leave it. Like Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, Uriel. We call them the four main angels of the throne of glory. And actually, our soul is rooted where they are. So there's a bit of competition going on. They don't like us too much. They told God not to create us. Okay, but God sided with us. Okay. These upper archangels, which think of them as the standing powers that bring the rest of reality into reality through various, again, through the traits, because remember, they're just using the same traits that we use. And that's the nature of these traits, these attributes. Okay, so after we come down from that level, now we enter the level of the good angels that come into the world because God wants to do things. And there's angels that are created from God's speech and from his thoughts, good thoughts. Now, if God's upset, he will produce thoughts that produce bad angels that come down here and do things. And Job is the classic story of that we read about on Tisha B'Av. You know, the whole setup in heaven was that God says to the angel, the prosecutor, where have you been? Oh, I've been flying around the universe. Have you considered my servant Job? That's the last thing you want God to do, is to ask the district attorney to open up your file. And that's what God did, because Job had a heshbon with the Jewish people, even though he was a great nephew of Avraham Avinu. That's another piece of midrash we'll have to talk about more sometime. Okay, so we have these upper good angels, and below them, well, as we go down through the pyramid, the angels get mixed. There are actually angels that are good and bad, just like human beings, just like human souls. They get mixed up. We start out pure and beautiful and perfect as babies, if not in this lifetime, in an earlier incarnation. But so too the angels, they mix. So there is a level of mixed angels. That's called the Olam HaYetzira. All good angels in Berea. I'm sorry I didn't mention the world names, because I don't want to overwhelm everybody with too much information at once. I hope you're writing some things down just to get the span of what we're doing. It's going to make more and more sense as we go. So we went from good angels to mixed angels, and then of course below them are the bad ones. They operate almost completely here. And there are those that are completely bad with no good. Now, what does that mean? A good, bad angel? That means they actually can do both. And how that looks? Well, a good, bad angel can actually do good for a person for a long time, and then the angel decides, you know what? This guy deserves a test. We're going to send him a test. But, you don't want this happening, obviously. And the tests oftentimes are not supposed to make us fail. That's one of the reasons why the Kabbalah teaches that Bala Mavet min excuse me, Bala Mavet Lenetzach means that God will swallow up death forever. There's going to be a time in creation, and I don't think it's too far away, that the concept, the reality of dying will no longer exist. They think about what? Frogs aren't going to die? Mosquitoes? Human beings? Okay, maybe we have this spark of infinity in us that's going to keep us alive in eternity, and we're not going to die when we'll leave our bodies, which is called dying. And then, no, but listen closer. If God what happens when you die? Your good spark goes to heaven. Now, what happens if heaven comes down here? Then you don't have to die, because heaven's already here. There's no transposition. Or I like the fancier, it's like a Hollywood word, transmogrification. Ooh, right? Throw that one out of the dictionary. But that's what they call it. And so if heaven and earth unify, which is part of the whole redemptive vision, then there's no longer the need to transfer from your body here to your condo in the sky. It's all going to be here, which is an outrageous idea if you start to think about it, because that will fulfill the idea of Bala Mavet Lenetzach, that death itself will no longer be a necessary concept, a need. The only reason we have death is because Adam and Eve ate from the duality. Once we go back to complete utter unity, which is Gan Eden, then Gan Eden is here, and nobody dies, and everything becomes completely different. How long it's going to take, what? I don't really care. I'm just on for the ride. I believe in it, and I'll wait my turn. God willing, I have a turn. Maybe I got to do a few more good deeds. Hey. But if so, you see, as we're coming down the tree, we're learning more and more, and we haven't even gotten to us. By the way, we're still on the level of the not good angels that try to test us, and the reason that the angel, the prosecutor, doesn't get to come back is because he overstepped his job description. Right? Anybody know anybody that gets fired because they do more than the boss wants? Not a happy day, right? Well, that's what happened. The great prosecutor, the Satan, and Lahastin means to prosecute or to bring bad, to bring evidence against. So his job was to present good and evil situations to humanity. Here's the bank. Here's the back door. The key's in the door. Are you going to go in and steal, or just keep on walking? Or be a good person and walk inside and say, someone left the key in the door of this vault in the back, You have two choices. Walk on, three. Steal, walk on, or do a good deed and notify somebody that they're about to suffer a loss. That's his job, to present the opportunities in reality, in this fluid theater that we live in. Guess what? This guy, I hate him. He got pushy. He didn't say, okay, Avraham, here's your choice. Here's your choices. He said, Avraham, go for it. Turn the door. Turn the key, open the door. You'll see gold like, stacks of hundreds. He's pushy. God did not tell him to push. He started to push, and the payment for all the evil that is done is that he's going to be wiped out completely. In an all good universe, folks, there's no need for a prosecutor. There's nobody to prosecute. We're all doing good and better and better and better. And now we're in the world of borer, which means to clarify, to choose between good and evil. Once that choosing's over, guess what? We're just choosing between good and better, not good and evil. May it come soon, you think about how much suffering this maniacal creature is caused. He doesn't deserve, he doesn't deserve to be around, in my opinion. Okay, he might not like this. I'll have to deal with him later. Yeah. But if you're firm and you're fierce, evil has no chance with us. If you have Torah and mitzvot, no chance. Okay, now we're coming down the pyramid. Guess what we've arrived at now? We've come to what we call the lower soul of man. That's where good and evil exist side by side, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Ra, good inclination, bad inclination, two guys fighting for the captain's chair in our brain, in our heart. That's the lower soul. That's where we spend most of our time thinking, contemplating, feeling, doing. And all of this, the physical creation, the Arizal writes, only happened because Adam and Eve took from that tree. They ate from the tree. God said, don't eat. You can even touch it. He didn't say that. That's how the snake got him. But Adam said, don't touch. So if your husband ever gives you a strict interpretation of the law, call me first. Because strict interpretations create great sins. A person needs to know the baseline halacha, and then you can be strict if you're on the level. Rabbi Nachman says it's not good to take on chumrot, only one thing. And that's another shiur. Okay? But here we are in the lower soul, in the physical world of choices between good and evil. Remember what we said earlier? Our parameters of measuring where we are in life depends on this battle that we're going through. Now, a lot of times you'll think people make a mistake, and this is a huge mistake, and Rabbi Nachman deals about it also in Likuti Moran, he says that big Hasidim think that when they're tested, they've fallen. That is a complete metaphysical mistake. We have not fallen from grace and God and Shekhinah and all the nice things because we're being tested. Actually, we're being given an opportunity to get closer. The fall is after the test, God forbid, that we make the wrong choice. But we have this juvenile, I've seen myself think this way, like, oh, I just don't want to be tested. I don't want to be tested enough. Well, that's like telling God, I don't want to get any closer, God, you're too big for me. And that's not the thing you want to say. You want to say, God, I don't know how, you guide me to you, because you know how much I can handle on any given day. So in our prayers to get close to Hashem, we have to be careful. We don't want to go too fast. You get burnt like the sons of Avraham, Cohen, Nadav and Avihu. They went in too fast, too close to the place they shouldn't go. And there was the Aron Kodesh, and their souls were taken out as fast as candles are put out. Okay. So this realm we're in is a tough place, a place of choices, constant choices. But Rabbi Nachman gives us strength always, and he says a beautiful thing. He says, all the tests, if we just stand up to them 3 or 4 times, they go away. And the Yetzer Hara, when he realizes that he's got no customer with you, he's got no business with you, that you're just going to keep saying no to the end of time, to doing sins, and yes to all the good things that we can do, then he's going to have to find new tools, and he's going to have to be more clever, and he's going to take us into more refined realms of choice. And those refined realms of choice have to do with fixing our kavana. Why am I doing the good deed? Because I want to look like a good guy? Because I want people to like me? Or am I doing a good deed because it needs to be done? Right now, it needs to be done. That's it. Don't get fancy. Don't get complicated. So that refinement of our intention, we have to go through it, but it's not like the big tests of doing right or wrong, keeping the 10 commandments kind of thing. All right, where are we on the tree? Well, guess what? We're leaving the human kingdom. We're going to go down to the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom, we associate, as we said earlier, the animal kingdom really doesn't have much free choice. They're acting on their body's instincts. When they're hungry, they look for food. When they're tired, they sleep. When they're a little bored, they'll play somewhat. If you're young enough, if you're too big, lions don't like to play. They get too big. They hurt each other. But cubs, they're fun. Okay. So they're basically operating on their body's needs. They're not thinking it through most of the time, as we said earlier. So what have we invoked here is the lack of free choice. The free choice is going down as we go down the pyramid. And in the animal kingdom, there are many levels too. And this is where it gets more complicated, but this is where kashrut enters the picture. I was speaking to some people that were, they're fairly new in religion, and they were saying, what's the difference between a lobster and, a hamburger? I said, well, the soul of the creature. What do you mean soul? Come on, Avraham, give me a break. A lobster has a soul. A cow has a soul. You Jews, everything has a soul. Well, we already went through that, remember? The level of animation, the level of the ability to respond and to give and to take, to receive and give, is the measure of the animation of a soul. A rock isn't very animated because it doesn't really give much, it doesn't really take much, it just sits there, and you try to avoid it. Okay. So in the animal kingdom, we have creatures that the Torah tells us we're allowed to eat, and creatures the Torah says you can't eat those. Why? For different reasons. We know, for example, when it comes to birds, we're only allowed to eat birds that don't eat other birds. Like crows will eat other birds, and eagles and other types. They eat. They're carnivorous. They eat other creatures, and so we don't eat them. This is a rule across kashrut. You'll notice cows don't eat other creatures either, and neither do sheep, and neither do goats, and neither do deer, and that's why we can eat them. Doesn't sound very nice, I know. Let's not go there. I just had an interesting discussion with a student about veganism, vegetarianism, and this person's a very interesting person. They're into veganism and vegetarianism, but they still eat meat and fish on Shabbos. I like that flexibility, but Shabbos is a time unto itself. Still, when what does it mean that a lobster has a soul that we can't eat? Well, first of all, it feeds on the bottom of the ocean and eats up a lot of garbage, and that's not good. And a cow eats something that we can actually eat, wheatgrass. Get a nice wheatgrass juice at the health food store. That's what they eat all day long. No wonder they're so big and fat and healthy, right? That wheatgrass juice is what we pay a lot of money for it. They get it for free. Okay, and same thing with the goats, and same thing with the sheep. Because we know that food affects our temperament, our personalities, our traits, our relative calm, our relative anger, our relative peacefulness, etc., etc. So the Torah wants us to be holy, and it's giving us parameters for that to bring us kind of into a more clarified zone. Eat these things, not those things, because these things are going to help you get closer to me, and these things are going to take you further away. And so it's not like we're prejudiced against certain creatures because they're ugly, or because it just has to do with their own natures and not mixing their nature with our nature. Okay, and then coming down from the animal kingdom, of course, is the plant kingdom. Now, in the plant kingdom, we tend to think that everything's kosher for us to eat, but actually it's not, because there are poisonous things that God doesn't want us to eat. We don't want to die eating oleander flowers. Those nice flowers they put on the side of the highway in Florida, millions of them. It's a very nice bush, has beautiful flowers. And when we were kids, we used to pick flowers, and you could chew on no, not oleander, it'll kill you. So there you have a distinction again. What is healthy for us and what is unhealthy for us. And that is a distinction that's existing in the plant kingdom. And that is throughout the plant kingdom. Now, there's another interesting distinction. The Zohar says that the apple, this is a good one. The apple is higher fruit than all the other fruits. Why? Because it contains both chesed and gevura. And you see in the color, I have an apple here. This is probably not the right apple to bring, but we'll try. This is a green apple, right? Granny Smith. Now, if you look close, you'll see that it's not totally green. It has little dots of white in it. And a regular red apple will have dots of yellow and red. Those colors represent different spheros, different energy powers that are going into the creation of those fruits. So the Zohar says apples are higher because they contain more of the span of traits or attributes or qualities that we already talked about. Because remember, everything's getting their life force from those attributes, everything. We just don't see how it works, but the Kabbalah teaches through the letters of creation, that's how it happens. All right. So all other fruits, and it gives another proof that says the apple, you can eat the fruit and the peel. Whereas you don't really want to eat a grapefruit peel, but you'll eat the fruit. And a walnut, don't try to eat that walnut nut. the outer part, because you're going to need to have a big dental bill, right? So what the Zohar says is that the part we throw away is called klipa. It's shell, literally. But the idea of klipa is that it's not usable for our consumption. It's not good for us. So remember the span: ultimate good, ultimate evil, and the idea of the mixing of the powers. Well, a grapefruit has a wonderful thing in there, but the outside is pretty bitter, and it might not be good for you. I was once on a bus trip from Athens to London, and I had no money left, and all I had was a bag of grapefruits. And I got to the point where I was eating some of the skin of the grapefruits. It was kind of like macho eating. What can I tell you? But I got to London in time to get a kebab. I think that's what people were eating back in the 80s. So, but the point is, you see, it has to do with this mixing of good and evil versus all good. Like the apple, you can eat everything, whereas the grapefruit, you can't. It teaches us about the mixtures of good and evil. That's at the level of the plant kingdom. Of course, the same is true with plants that we use for medicines and plants that are used for poisons, and all of these distinctions are still represented in our pyramid. How are we doing on time? Ooh, moving on. Okay. Below that is the mineral kingdom. Now, the mineral kingdom is all the rocks, obviously, in the mountains and all the sand and everything that's made of minerals. Where is there distinctions there? Well, the Torah tells us that there were, in the beginning of creation, it starts to tell us there are certain lands that have a lot of gold. So already gold was pointed out as a special metal. This is a special metal, and you're going to find it in these 4 different lands. There's still debates today where those lands are, but there are a few places in Africa where they have tribes that they have just tremendous amounts of gold. And the interesting thing is, wait a minute, there's something going on here. Throughout the construction of the Beit HaMikdash and the Mishkan, which is the portable Mikdash, we're told to cover the box with gold, and we're told that there's going to be a golden menorah, and all this gold is being used. And then we're told you can't use iron on the Mizbeach. No iron. Why iron? Because it's used in war to make swords to kill people. And the whole idea of the Beit HaMikdash is to bring peace between God and man. And when men kill each other, God is not happy. Just like any parents, your kids fight, you're not happy. So imagine how God feels right about now. So in the Mikdash is a perfect example where you have different substances from the mineral kingdom. Some are considered holy, some are considered unholy, some are usable and glorify God's presence, and some we say leave them out. No iron here. That is, again, one of these parameters of good and evil, or what is sanctified or not. Okay, so all of these, we've moved quite a bit in the physical, spiritual realm here in this discussion. One of the most important principles that we need to understand is the answer to the question, why did God create man last? God spent a long time creating creation. His divine days, the 6 days of creation, are not like 24-hour days, obviously. And although some say they were, I'm not going to get into that debate. The earth and the moon were physical bodies. The earth and the sun and the moon were not created until Wednesday of creation. So how did they measure time before that, if we're going to say that they're really 24 hours based on this, the earth's spin on its axis? So And we know that a godly year is 365,000 years compared to one human year. But the reason the rabbis tell us, and they don't tell us all that mathematics and stuff behind the scenes, the reason they say that man was created last is because man would have an element of all the things that were created before him in him. So they had to be created first because all the elements of creation were put into the creation of man. And that's another reason why we say that man is God's masterpiece. He created a being that could be free and he could have a relationship with a being. It's not very fun having a relationship with a robot. Although there is a movie out, I think, about an old man who becomes friends with a robot. It's a pretty special robot, but so man is very special because we have an element in us, whether it's a frog or an electron or a photon or a piece of Mars. We have pieces of all creation in us, even if it's just the microscopic level. And that makes us the collective representation of all creation. And that's very important to understand because that's what makes us into a conduit of the divine. Because all creation is God's. And if he can put a little bit of all the creation into us, we become a miniature of the whole. And now you understand the holographic structure of the universe, what the Arizal says. The universe is a giant man, and man is a tiny universe. We are a really shrunken up little universe. And God is the totality of all of it at the largest level, and we are at the smallest level. And so that's why, because we have a holographic reflection of him, we have the ability to communicate at a much higher, precise, and connected on all levels, emotionally, intellectually, with love and awe to the Creator. All right, now I want to do our meditation. Maybe we'll have to go on next week because there's endless amounts of examples and information and principles that we need to learn. I think we've covered a lot today, and to end where we ended is a good place to end. Okay, so as we normally do, let's take a break for a minute or two. Do what you got to do and turn off the phones and turn off the satellite dishes, and well, maybe not. Maybe you'll lose your connection. Let's try to get into a very calm, peaceful place. Okay. First, let's exhale. The real secret of deep breathing is not inhaling, it's exhaling. It's one of the secrets. Just letting everything fall. As we begin to its own shape, its own posture. So many times in life we adjust our posture to a situation, to another person, to an idea, to an emotion. Maybe we can just let our bodies be what they are, the gifts that they are. Whatever your shoulders want to do, let them do. If your head feels heavy, let it fall. Let's begin to inhale. Hold the breath at the top, and then exhale. Each breath a movement of its own. Each inhalation is a gift. Each exhalation is a release of stress. Notice as you breathe and relax, tension begins to leave your body, your shoulders, your neck, your spine, down to your lower back, through your hips, into your thighs and knees, down through your ankles, into your feet, and down into the world, through the floor, into the earth, the great magnet that grounds us, that makes us an electrical conduit for the power that comes from above. As you inhale, with your eyes closed, of course, look upward. What do you see? Look upward until you feel the muscles of your eyes stretch, until you can feel the tendons pull. Look upward until a light seems to appear somewhere beyond your forehead. Hold that as long as you can. And then relax. Allow the vision plane to fall. Notice something, that even the muscles of your eyes appreciate stretching. That also induces relaxation. As you exhale, exhale as long as you can from the tops of your lungs down into your belly, contracting, removing as much of the old air, old ideas, old feelings, old notions, old CO2. Release it all to reach for true emptiness. Pause and then begin to inhale from the bottom up until again your eyes want to arise. And remember what the Torah says. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw a place from afar. The place of his greatest test. It is afar, only seen by those lifted eyes. The place of the Akedah, the sacrifice of Isaac. The place every parent must go, must bring his fear. To give that gift. That greatest gift. Our children back to him, back to his care, back to his perfection. People endure this test every day. But when we lift our eyes and see beyond the place, we see the angels weeping into the eyes of Isaac. From which he would become blind. For the remainder of his life. Who were these weeping angels? What did they represent? Are they not extensions of God's heart? Come down to mankind. God weeping through the angels for Isaac's sacrifice and Abraham's dedication. For in all these levels of reality, to the mountain, to the donkey, to the knife, to the man, to the altar, to the fire, are they not all created by one universal being? We answer yes, and yet they are so different. And as Abraham's heart broke to sacrifice his son, God's heart broke for Abraham. And so we are one with a great universal process. Called Maaseh Bereshit, the action of creation. God creating man and man creating relationship. Each fulfilling the other's purpose. And what play of qualities created this event? The awe of Yitzhak, the love of Abraham. And the Tiferet, the balance and beauty of the Shekhinah, which integrates all traits into one light being. Let us see our place in these universal events, our role creates our purpose. Our purpose directs our action, and lights of heaven come to earth. Bathe in those lights, become one with ourselves, one with creation, one with Creator. Amen. Okay. Shabbos is coming. If anybody would like to share something, ask something. Shalom Liat. I don't know what your comment means, Liat, but it's still funny. I gather that there was some kind of background noise going. I don't know what the poo-poo is about, but okay. Thank you all for being there. Thank you, Miriam. You should have a great Shabbat, all of you, wherever you are. But really, wherever we are is in here, in our hearts, in our minds, and we can be anywhere, as the Baal Shem Tov teaches us, with thought and with mind. So I invite you all here to Eretz Israel for Shabbat.
Amen.
At least in your mind.
If we clap our hands, it's like we're in the air of Israel, apparently.
Amen, amen, amen.
It's not as hard as you think. We just have to, just like we did tonight, we have to take a little corner in the back of the Beit Knesset where nobody's bothering you. and follow the steps like we do them, and you can go anywhere you need to go. Thank you, Wayne, Zev, and nice to see all of you. Ari Pertin, that's a new name. Welcome, Ari. Vilma Bonilla, I think that's a new name. Vilma. Of course, Rhonda, it's nice to see you always.
Thank you.
And Yaakov, I hope all is well for you. And, part of the idea of the meditation also is that if you see something or hear something, you're not sure what it is, you can always write me at Rabbi Avraham Shira at Gmail and ask me, what do you think? What's going on? Because part of the journey in meditation is through the disembodied pieces of ourselves. It's a discipline unto itself. But when we understand that we're actually traveling through layers of ourselves, then the things we see along the way might be very significant, are very significant. Okay, we'll leave you with that. Have a great Shabbat, and we'll look for you next week. Shabbat Shalom.